What is up? I'm Harbor Bickmore with Extra Credit Design Club, and in this series, we are going to learn how to create your very first typeface. We're going to create a geometric sans serif font using the Glyphs Mini software. So this class is for graphic designers who are looking to get into type design, whether just to, add a new skill to your toolkit or generate a little bit of passive income for yourself. Whatever it is, if you're a graphic designer looking to get into type design, this series is for you. That being said, you do not need any prior experience with type design. However, as a graphic designer, if you are familiar with the Adobe softwares, Illustrator in particular, you will have an easy time seamlessly transitioning into using the Glyphs Mini software. One note about the Glyphs Mini software is that it is for Mac only. Also, what this class is not going to be, it's not going to be a history lesson or classifications of type design or anatomy of type, none of that. This series is specifically to learn the technical skills of designing a typeface, specifically a geometric sans serif. With that, to kind of set the expectations, in this series, you will learn three main things. Number one is you will learn how to use the Glyphs Mini software. Glyphs Mini is a great way to start to learn type design because once you graduate from that, there's Glyphs, just plain Glyphs. And that's an industry standard software for type design that once you're familiar with Glyphs Mini, the transition is super easy. The second thing you will learn is how to design a typeface, A to Z, capital, lowercase, numbers, and punctuation. Now, the third thing you are going to learn for this class is an efficient workflow. I'm going to teach in a way that will allow you to create visually consistent typefaces fast. This being part one in the series, the first thing that we're going to cover is the interface of the Glyphs Mini software and designing our first group of letters. Do not be afraid to pause, rewind, and rewatch this video as necessary. I would highly encourage you to follow along so that you can get that muscle memory, build your skills stronger than just on a conceptual level. And that's it. Let's get right into it. So what we have here is the website where you can buy the Glyphs Mini software or download it and have a 30-day free trial. You can see up here, it's just glyphsapp.com/buy. It'll take you here. You can either buy the Glyphs 3 or Glyphs Mini 2, which we will be using in this video. You could buy it for €50, or you can click download the app, and like I said, just get that 30-day free trial. That's what I'm going to do for the sake of this video. And then after the 30 days, when you realize that this is well worth €50, you can buy it. So opening up the app for the first time, this is what you are going to see. If you purchased it, you can drag that license here. If not, you just hit continue trial, and that's that. So the first thing, workflow-wise, that you want to do when you are starting a typeface is decide what your character set is. Or in other words, what letters, numbers, punctuation, and symbols you want included in your typeface. By default, Glyphs Mini will give you an A to a Z in capital and lowercase, 0 through 9, and a little bit of punctuation. That's the basic. But we ain't gonna hit you with that basic. I'm gonna go over a little bit more in depth of the things that you need to design, so we are going to add a few characters to the mix. In this top left panel, you can see that you can twirl down and select just uppercase letters, and then they'll be displayed here in this main window. Lowercase, ligatures, which we don't have, small caps, again, superscript. We don't have that stuff. So we'll twirl that back. And what we want to add is twirling down a bit of punctuation. So you can see we got 2 out of 19 here, 1 out of 3 here. We have a period, comma, and hyphen. But we want to add some more. So how you do that is with these little pills, you are going to control click. And then you can see that it will open up this menu of all kinds of different glyphs or characters that you have available in that category. I'm going to add them all. I'm going to do it dang all. I'm going to select this first one, hold shift, select the last, and hit generate. And now you can see when we go back to all that we have now the colon, semicolon, the exclamation, the question, the numbers, all of that. So I'm going to add just the rest of this punctuation again in the same way. Control clicking the pill and then selecting all of these, hit generate, add my dashes, and finally all my different quotation marks, generate. Now I'm going to close that up, go back to all, and for this video, I feel like this is a good character set. If you want to get spicier, that's up to you. The things that we will cover in this video will give you the skills to create a larger variety of characters. But for now, this is what we're going to work with. Now that we have our character set established, we want to establish our guides and kind of the core principles of this typeface. And you do that by clicking this little I for info. So when you click it, you'll notice that this whole main window changes. What happens is that a new tab is opened up here called the info tab. If you want to get rid of it, you simply click this X and you are back to the main window. But clicking back in, we're going to dive into defining the characteristics of this font, which is the second step in your workflow. One thing that I like to do is define my guides with the cap height. For me personally, I like to make my cap height and my ascender the same. Especially being a geometric sans, we want things nice and square, so we're going to keep the cap height and the ascender at 800 the same. Personal preference for me as well, I like taller X height, so my lowercase letters are a bit taller, so I'm going to do 600 here. Anything taller than 600 and you're going to run into a bit of difficulty working out letters like the lowercase f, lowercase I, lowercase a, things like that. So I would say about 600 is the max that you want to go for X height. And my descender, I like to keep -200. I like to keep it, again, just personal preference for a geometric sans serif, the same distance or the same size as my ascender. So my ascender, is technically 200 pixels higher than my X height with 800 and 600. So I want my descender to also be 200. Now, one thing to make note of, good practice with type design, is you are going to want your tallest measurement here, in this case my ascender and my cap height, and your lowest measurement here, descender, to have a difference of 1,000 units. So 800 to -200, that distance is 1,000 pixels. And when you're moving your guides, you're going to want to do them in unison, always keeping 1,000 pixels between the two. Moving on, this is something I've just worked out previously. I want my vertical stems to be 80 units. You'll see what that means later on, and my horizontal stems to be 72. Generally, you want your horizontal stems to be around 90% of what your vertical stems are. Italic angle, we're not going to worry about because we're not making an italic typeface here. Generally, around 12 degrees is an acceptable italic angle. 15, okay, you're getting a little somewhere. 20, way spicy, and that's a choice. But just if you're interested in what's a normal value, around 12 degrees is normal. Alignment zone, we're going to skip that for now. We're coming back to that in a later video. Designer, this is me, Harbor Bickmore. I'm not even going to capitalize it because I'm not conceited. I'm so humble. I don't need capital letters. Designer URL, thebestgraphicdesignerintheworld.com. No, it's not a joke URL. It is my actual URL. The manufacturer can be different than the designer if you're thinking, of starting your own type foundry. For example, I, Harbor Bickmore, run the type foundry that creative. So for manufacturer, I always put that creative, and the manufacturer URL that you can buy these typefaces at thattype.com. Version 1.000, it's the first version of the font. Now when I hit copyright, it'll automatically generate copyrighted by Harbor Bickmore, and then I can add a license type. I will put personal use, and that will be my gift to you at the end of this series. If you want to download this typeface for personal use, feel free to do so. I don't know why you would need to, because you're going to make your own typeface. But I digress. Finally, I'm just going to have this be a normal way. Normal and regular can be used interchangeably, and it's going to be a medium width. It's not compressed, condensed, it's not expanded, it's not a bold version of anything, it's not an italic version of anything. And as far as the units go, I always keep that at 1,000. I've never found a reason to change it. And subdivisions, this is, how many points you want on your grid. I always keep it at 1. Again, never found a reason to change it, with one caveat of creating pixel fonts, but we won't go there, not in this series. So this is the characteristics of your font. Now all you have to do is name it. I'm going to call it Extra Geo, sure. And the version, it will be a regular version. It's not bold, italic, display, text, none of that, just regular. And with that, I am going to exit this font window, and I'm going to save it. Always save often. That's nothing new, but I'm just reminding you because we all need reminders. So moving on, we are going to talk about this main panel here. I know there's still something on this bottom left. We ain't going to get into it. I know we got a little something on the right. We ain't going to get into it. Not yet. We'll cover those in future videos. Don't worry. So, in this main window, as you can guess, this is where we interact with our typeface as a whole. We can click and select individual letters and they'll become highlighted. We can click and hold shift and we can select a series of numbers, and then if you want to, you can hold command and select numbers that aren't in a row, just individual ones. Now, once you have letters selected, let's pretend I want to open up and edit this A. You can double click into the A, and as you see here, if I hold Command plus to zoom in, right away we have our A with the bounding box that has the dimensions we specified earlier. So this is a 200 unit descender, this is an 800 unit cap height, and we have a grayed out letter A that we can't interact with. It's simply there as a placeholder indicating, hey, you haven't designed this letter yet, but it is supposed to be the letter A. In the same way that the Info button opened up a new tab, when you click into a letter, a new tab will be opened, and this is the editing window. I'm going to exit out of it for now. There are a couple different ways to open up the editing window. As you saw, you can simply double click a letter. If you select a string of letters and double click those, let me zoom out here, then you can select a group of letters and double click into each individual letter to edit them. I'm going to exit out of that again. And finally, this is the way that I usually open letters, is with any group of letters selected. Let's do H, L, I, T, let's do E, let's do I and L. You can hold Command and hit down arrow. Now, you can see that these letters automatically populate in alphabetical order regardless of the order which you select them. So in this video, the characters that we are going to design are the E, H, I, L, T, lowercase I, and lowercase l. However, we're not going to design them exactly in this order. We are going to start with the H. So let me double click into the H here, and you know what? I don't want all the rest of this clutter of these other letters while I'm trying to design my H. So we can take care of that by selecting right up here the text tool or simply hitting T on the keyboard. I strongly recommend you always use the keyboard shortcuts. Every time I do something new, I'll mention it here. So this text tool is T. And this is just like any other typing software. I can use my arrow keys to select different letters, and I can delete them as I choose and type them as I choose as well. Like I said, we are going to start with the capital H. So with just a capital H, still with my text tool selected, I can double click into a glyph, and you can see I've entered edit mode. Just zoom in there with Command plus, and we can start drawing. The first tool that we're going to familiarize ourselves with is the primitive tool. So up here on this little toolbar, I am going to select this rectangle tool. You can tell the rectangle tool is active because I have a little rectangle by my cursor. Now I am going to, from the top of the cap height indicated by this brown guide, click and drag to the bottom of the guide. Now you can see at the bottom right corner of this rectangle a couple of numbers. These indicate the width and height of this shape. Now I can try and get it exact 80, but let's say I miss. I'm 81 pixels. I can tell because down here, when I have this stem selected, I have 81 pixel width and 800 height. 800 is a good height. It automatically snapped to my guide, so that was easy. But instead of 81, I am going to type 80 right here. I'm gonna hit enter. I'm gonna go back to my selection tool, or you can hit V, like in any Adobe software, and deselect this stem. All right, so I have my first shape drawn. If I want to preview what this shape looks like, I can hold down the space bar. And I can see just a black and white, no guides, no noise indication of what this letter looks like. One thing I like to do as well on occasion is if I select my type tool here and type another capital H, you can see that as I edit this character, the H that I've typed next to it also is edited. And I'm going to hit undo. At this point, I'm going to talk about selecting. Now, obviously you've seen me click and drag over specific points, and that's something that you can do to select specific points. If you want to select paths, you can single click any path, and then it will select the path and the points. One thing that's awesome is that this information down here will always indicate the width and height between the points you have selected. So you can see that the height here is 0, meaning that these are horizontally aligned, and the width is 80. If I select these 2 points on the side, you can see that the width between the points is 0, they're vertically aligned, and the height is 800. If I click and drag over the whole shape, then I am 80 and 800. Awesome, we saw that. And finally, if I want to select a whole shape quickly, I can simply double click any path on that shape. Double clicking the points is not what you want. You have to double click the paths in order to select the shapes. Moving right along, this being a geometric sans serif, we want this H to be based off a primitive shape of a square. We want it to look as square as possible, or just as square as you'd like, depending on how strict you want to be. So what I'm going to do is copy and paste this shape. Double clicking a path, Command C, Command V. Now when you copy and paste in glyphs, you'll notice that the shapes copy exactly in their place, or rather paste exactly in their place. Now, you could try and click and drag and move them, but the only problem is you are going to move both shapes. So, again, you can double click a path and then use the arrow keys to move your object. If you arrow key left, right, up, and down, it will move it 1 unit. If you hold shift, it will move it 10 units. And if you hold command, it will move your shape 100 units at a time. I'm just going to select these bottom points here, and I'm going to see how wide the whole shape is. 430 pixels. I think I am going to move it, yeah. What do we got here? 660 pickles. Pickles? 660 seems to be working out, but we're running into a problem. This stem is beyond the bounding box, and it's causing this first H that I typed to crash into the second H. So this brings us to a very important concept in type design, is when you are designing letters, you are not only designing the letters themselves, but you need to design the negative space in between each letter. So if you look here at the bottom of your screen, you see the little H icon here. We have 41 and negative 101. This indicates the negative space to the left and right of our H. So just to start off, I am going to have 100 and 100. So now there are 100 empty pixels or negative space on the left and right side of my H, and you can see that my second H I typed automatically updates. And whether I change this H or this H, it doesn't matter. All of the H's in my typeface will change. So the last thing we need to do to complete this H is obviously add the crossbar. Now for that, I'm just going to use the same technique, have my primitive active, or hit F. Now, if for some reason when you hit F, your cursor looks like this with a little circle to the bottom right, just hit Shift F, and you can toggle between your primitive rectangle and your primitive ellipse. So in this case, I want my primitive rectangle. I'm going to click and drag here, and that crossbar looks pretty good. However, instead of 74 pixels, I'm going to test out 72. Alright. That looks pretty good. However, this crossbar to me looks a little bit high. So I'm going to select it, and I am just going to arrow down until it looks to me as if it is in the center. And that looks good. Now, let's see if it actually is in the center, and it'll bring up an interesting point. If I click and drag over these 2 points here, again looking at my info panel, it will give me the information that I need to know about the relationship of these 2 points. I can see that they're 23 pixels apart vertically and 390 pixels apart horizontal or vertically. The prior was horizontal, excuse me. But if I select these 2 points, I can see that the value here is 338. So 338 compared to 390, obviously this bar is not in the exact center. It is a little bit higher than the exact center. But visually, it appears to be in that center. And that is a very important concept in type design, is you want to do what is visually correct as opposed to what is mathematically correct. It's something that we'll go back to a bunch of times, but this is kind of your first introduction to the concept. In type design, it's always important to make things visually correct above mathematically correct. So, with the crossbars, instead of going exact center, I am going to raise them up a little bit so that it feels centered. So there you have it. You've designed your first letter officially. I'm talking about capital H. And when I'm designing a typeface, it's the letter I always start with, because so many things are related and compared to the dimensions of the capital H. For example, moving on, we are going to design, what were the letters I indicated at first? E, H, I, F, L, T, lowercase I, lowercase l. So, the I in this typeface, for example, if I just copy this stem, click into the I, paste, and I change my side bearings to be 100 and 100. Easy as that, I have my I. But we're going to make things even easier. I know, for consistency's sake, that the side of my H here is 100, and this side is 100, and that's just a guess for what might work. I might change that in the future. But I know that if I change the side bearings of the H with this straight shape, I also am going to have to change the side bearings for the I. So to save myself time, I'll get into my I and type H and H. And now you can see that whatever the side bearings are on my H, if I should change them in the future, they will be updated and automatically changed on the I. So I think we can move on. Let's try our letter F here. So I'm going to select this stem, select this stem, copy, and paste them onto the letter F. You can see I have a bit of an issue. I'm at -120. Let's just do 100 for kicks, and I'll do H for this left side bearing. And now if I hold down shift, okay, I'm previewing my F. It's looking all right. I'm going to copy and paste this, and then double click, hold command, move it up, hold shift, move it up, and then just nudge it. Now you can see here that these brown little diamonds appear around the points when it is lined up with the cap height. So that's very convenient, super easy to just visually, that's that. Alright, so if I hold down the space bar, we can preview here. You know what? That F is looking a little bit top heavy. The negative space right here and the negative space right here are uneven. So I want to correct that. I'm going to double click that. I'm going to hold space bar, and as I hold space bar, I am going to just drag this down until, to me, it looks visually balanced. The space under the F and above the F. And that looks pretty good. Another thing that you might do with the F is make a decision about how wide you want it to be relative towards the H. So, my H, if I double click here into the H and Command A to select everything, I go down here, I can see the width of my H is 660 units. My F, let's go into here, Command A, 620 units. Now it just so happened that the crossbar here kind of lined up nicely and gave me an even, 620. And generally, you want your capital F to be slightly more narrow than your capital H. That is because visually, these horizontal bars lead your eye sideways, and it makes the object appear wider. With that being said, in order to compensate visually for that, I want my F to be slightly less wide than my H. I might play around, just nudge it a pixel here, a pixel there, but I think it just so happens, yeah, we'll do that. We'll only change it 10 pixels. We'll say 610 pixels is a good width for the F. Now, if we have the F, we can just copy that, paste it into the E, copy and paste that one arm, line it up nicely. I'll add 100 here, I'll add an H there, and okay, we have our E. The E, in a similar way to the F, elongates along its horizon because these 3 vertical stems. Another thing we're going to run into with the E is that now this negative space between the bottom and middle arm looks smaller than the negative space between the top arm. And let's just check to make sure. Selecting these 2 points, we're at 297, and here we're at 287. So if you had a keen eye, out of 1,000 pixels that we have here, you could tell it's 10 off. And I am just going to bump that up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pixels the other direction. So yep, 297, 287. And now to me, that looks more visually centered. One thing that we can do is, if we want to be exact, line up the arm of the E with the crossbar of the H. We can do that by either copying and pasting it in, or we can select this bottom point of the H, and then I can indicate here, it's indicated that this point vertically is on the 390th pixel, and my E is 369. So let's go. Now it's 370, 2 more, and you can see that the E now looks a little bit uptight. That's a little too small compared to that for my liking. So I'm going to bring that back down. Now it's at 370, and maybe, just for consistency's sake, I'm going to select this H and bring it down as well. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And you can see that as I did the E, I made a decision about the H, and as you design each letter, you'll kind of go back and forth, making decisions, deciding how consistent you want to be with this or that character. Looking back at the H and the E, I'll leave it for now. I might get back to it later. Moving on, if I'm selecting this stem and the arm of the E, I'm copying them and I'm going to paste them into the L. I'm going to add, on all my other characters I've been adding 100 pixels on either side of space. For the L though, I know that it's really going to be, there's so much negative space in the L that I want as little space as possible on the right side of it. So I'm just going to do 10 and see how that feels. You know what? That L is looking pretty good just as is. The F, the L, the E, they all feel similar in width. And their relationship with the H, it's very similar. Optically, they feel all the same width. I'm going to go start on the T. Might as well just copy and paste the L. Then select this bar. Bring it up to the top. Select this middle stem. Holding command, bring it to the center. And I am going to add 10 pixels there and 10 pixels there. The T, like the L, is going to have a lot of negative space under it, so I don't want a big wide side bearing. Now something interesting happens here. If I hold spacebar, even though this T is 553 pixels, that's weird. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Might as well make it an even 560 pixels. It looks so much skinnier than this H, which is 660 pixels. So let's select these 2 points, hold command, right arrow. And now, if we select our whole glyph by holding Command A, we can see that the width, 660, is the same as the H. Now, I want to center this, so what I'm going to do is measure from this point to that point, 337, and this point to that point, 243, and I am just going to make it until 287, 293. So if I move it 3 pixels to the left, 1, 2, 3, that should be centered. 290, and indicating down here, 290. So now my bar is centered. I'm going to adjust the side bearings, not that much. And holding down the spacebar, you can see we have an interesting problem. The T appears to be less wide than the H. Seems to be counterintuitive because it has a stronger crossbar horizontal presence and only one vertical line. However, for whatever reason, the optics of your mind are telling you that that T is not as wide as the H. So I'm just going to, select the sides, add a few pixels. Now to me, not too much. Okay, 700. That width to me looks to be pretty good. Again, once I design more letters and start designing words, I'm going to look at them as a whole and make small adjustments. But just starting off, we just want to get something down. So this T, to me, looks pretty good. All right, the next thing we're going to design is our I, our first lowercase letter. So we're going to select the stem of our T, copy that, paste that in. Then we're going to select just these two top points, hold Command and down arrow twice. I'm going to drop it 200 pixels. You can see that the diamond lines up, indicating that it's hitting the X height. Remember, my cap height was 800 and my X height was 600. So just 200 pixels down low. Going back into my T. It's going to drive me crazy if it's crashing into my other letters. So I'll change the side bearings to 10 and 10. And in my H, I will go 100 and 100. And then the last thing I need is the little jot above the I, the little tittle, if you will. So I will copy and paste my stem in, hold Command, and just move it up. Get these two things selected, and if I hold Shift, it will constrain them vertically, drag it down. And now I got options with this little I dot. Let's say I want to make it a rectangle like that. That's your choice, but it's a choice. Let's say I want to make it, it's 100 pixels now, a perfect square. So if I select it, you can see 80 by 80. It's a perfect square. That's something. You got to make a decision with the tittle. Being a geometric typeface, maybe instead of a square, I'm going to delete that, hit F, hit Shift F to switch to my circle primitive. I'm going to click in, and maybe I want to have a circle that is 100 by 100 pixels. And then I will add that. Oh, got away from me. Let's see how that looks. If I click here and here, I can see that the 38 pixels, it's too far to the right, and I can make it centered. Now, okay, 40 pixels by 40 pixels. We're looking good with the jot above the I. Now, one thing that's interesting is the circle here is 100 pixels wide, whereas the stem is only 80 pixels. However, visually, the dot holds about the same weight. That is because circular forms, I'm not even going to tell you. You're going to have to watch the next video about circular forms, where we talk about drawing circular letters. But just hold on for now. The last decision you need to make about the tittle is how high you want it to be relative to the cap height. In this case, I think if I have it right at the cap height, and if I make it 80 pixels, I don't know, maybe that negative space is a little too much. However, 2, 3, that feels a bit tight, and it might get a bit weird being so close to the cap height, but not quite. So it might be a problem that I need to solve later on. For now, I'm just going to pick something and see how it works in the greater context of the typeface. You don't want to get too lost in the details before you design everything out, right? Just get a quick down, and then you can decide once you've designed out the full typeface. Last but not least, I'm going to finish on a super easy letter. I'm talking about the lowercase l, which in this context is just going to be the exact same as the uppercase I. And bada bing, bada boom, we've designed our first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 letters, and we can officially start writing some words. We can do left, and we can do hill. Very exciting. That's a whole sentence. Which hill? Left hill. You know what I'm saying? In the next couple videos, we are going to go more into the minutia of type design. Here we designed the majority of the straight glyphs. Next, we are going to design the round letters. Then we are going to design the letters with shoulders. Then we are going to design the angled letters. Then we'll move on to numbers and punctuation using the same technique and ideology of these groups of shapes: straight, round, shouldered, angled. We're going to start with those because if you just want to design A through Z, you'll be able to. But after that, we are going to get into the numbers, the punctuation, and the symbols using the same techniques that we covered in the first couple videos, but applied to punctuation, which sometimes has weird exceptions to the rules. After we've designed all of the characters in our typeface, we are going to have a video dedicated to spacing, the space in between the letters, the side bearings, the kernings, what have you. And we are also going to talk about how to export your font. That about wraps it up. As always, if you have any questions, if anything is unclear, let us know in the comments and we will work to get everything resolved. In the next video, we are going to go over the round glyphs, and I will catch you there.